All right, so before we get to building our phasers, we're going to need to understand how preset structure works in the 3 software. I made the mistake coming into this of assuming that it was the same as it was in MA2, and it is similar in most ways, but there are a couple of important distinctions that are necessary to understand as you get into trying to manipulate data for this workflow, for any workflow, but you will see it become relevant as we dig in. So when we talk about preset scope, there are 3 scopes in both MA2 and MA3. The scope can be universal, meaning that the information is available to any fixture that has the attributes stored within the preset. It can be global, meaning that it's available to all fixtures of the same fixture type, and it can be selective, meaning it's available to the specific fixtures that were stored into that preset. If you need further clarification on how universal versus global versus selective is supposed to work, I would highly encourage looking into MA's resources on explaining those. Now, for our purposes, just to quickly show, these 3 red presets were built with a set of liras, and the last one was built with only 1 lira. So universal is available to all, we see it's green. Global is available to all liras, so we see it's green. Selective was only available to the 1 fixture, so we see that is only being picked up by the 1 fixture. If I grab my tornadoes, those same 3 presets, universal is the only thing available. Global is obviously not available because the tornadoes are not liras. And down to selective, the tornadoes were not used for that preset, so they're not available. What has changed from MA2 is that in MA2, there was a universal fixture type. This was essentially a virtual fixture type that held all of the values for data that was intended to be available universally. So that fixture type number 1, was a virtual fixture type that would be stored into your presets. And if a fixture tries to use that preset, it sees that there is something stored for this. So if it doesn't have selective available, if it doesn't have global available, it will use the universal information. In MA3, it's slightly different. A universal preset is actually just a global preset with a flag turned on that says this information is allowed to be used globally. And I had to dig into the XML structure of exported presets to figure this out. I don't want to bore anybody with that, but if you dig in just very briefly over here, if you dig into the information contained within selective attributes, you will see that they say selective is on. The only flag that's actually turned on or off for an individual attribute is whether or not it is selective. And then, so if it's not selective, it's global. But then if it's global and at the far end over here, the preset mode internal is set to universal, then that's allowed to be reused by other fixtures. Where this becomes important is if you store universal information into a preset that already has universal information, but it's of a different fixture type, there is no designated slot item, whatever, that you are updating. You have just added new global information in there. If a third fixture type calls it, it will grab the first available fixture type to create its output. So let me turn off this phaser and we can see what I'm talking about. So if I say I want my liras and let me add additional information in here. So if I grab my tornado cells and I put them in Congo, I'm going to grab my MAC1s and put them in green, and I'm going to store universal into this. notice that our universal preset, which should be in MA2 logic, should only have, if it only has universal information, should only have one set of values, is showing us 3 different sets of values. And if I grab my Mach 1s, my tornadoes, and my lyras and put them at this, we will see 3 different values appear for this. What I've explained about it, it's a global preset with something just turned on saying this can be reused by other fixtures. That is why you never see a U and a G on the same preset. That's why there's no distinction between the two, because in the software itself, there is no distinction between the two. It's just, is this allowed to be reused by other fixtures or not? So this becomes really important to understand when you're trying to update a universal preset, and we're going to use entirely universal presets for building our phasers. Even for the selective information, we're going to use universal information. That'll make sense when we get there. But this is really, really, really important to know, because if you're trying to do a store merge into something and you need multiple fixture types to do the same thing, you're going to hate your life. If you don't understand that this is what's happening in the background, because you think you're storing into the universal information, but you're actually storing multiple tiers of multiple fixture types of global information. So that's my spiel on preset scope. Next video, we're going to start going into some other details on preset information and using them in recipe lines.